What's up, everybody? It's your boy Marvin Melendez. You're listening to another episode of All My Friends Talk, where I talk to all my creative artists, advocates, and our all-around amazing friends. Guys, I'm so excited about this episode today. I'm talking with someone who's truly amazing, truly inspiring, and I think you're really gonna love this conversation. I have Allison Ungaro, correct, from
Yes,
Creative Gainesville. How are you, Allison?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Awesome. So we're going to talk a lot today about human trafficking, which is kind of what you've been working in for quite some time now. Is that correct?
Right, 8 years now.
Wow, 8 years. So to clarify, what is human trafficking? Like, can you give me like a broad definition of it?
Right, right. So for Creative Gainesville, we focus on sex trafficking. So there's various lanes of human trafficking, and it can include sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and a combination of the two. And so for sex trafficking, we look at the definition, which includes that it occurs when someone, whether it's a pimp or a trafficker, uses force, fraud, or coercion to cause a commercial sex act with an adult or causes a minor to commit a commercial sex act. And that was a huge development that we were really excited about in the field of sex trafficking, is that when the definition had that addition of including minors, it doesn't have to include force, fraud, or coercion. If there's a minor involved in commercial sex acts, it is automatically deemed a sex trafficking situation. And so that's really helpful for us when we look at prosecuting sex traffickers, that when it involves a minor, there are really harsh penalties and a very strong stance that this is not okay for children to be exploited. And there's no such thing as child prostitution. So these are really important gains that we've seen over the last few years.
Now, whenever I think of sex trafficking, the one like immediate response I think of is that movie Taken with Liam Neeson. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where
Yes.
where someone kidnaps his daughter, he goes and like gets in a giant gunfight and finds all these like, you know, really awful things. And from my understanding, that like that's how it exists. But I think I've learned from you and from others that's not what it always looks like. Is that correct?
You're so right. You're so right. A lot of times the movies portray sex trafficking as this kidnapper that comes through with a white van and snatches kids up. And yes, that happens, but that's not the majority of cases. The majority of cases actually involve somebody who has a relationship with that child or adult and is close to that person, has earned their trust, maybe even a family member. And I think that's what really shocks people when they start hearing about sex trafficking, is that idea of like, wait, what? Like parents are trafficking their kids, or, it's somebody that befriended a child and should be a trusted adult, has come in a way that just kind of slipped through the cracks. And that adult gained trust with that child, and suddenly they're grooming them for the sex industry. So that's the one of the myths that we really want to dispel in the work that we do, because the majority of cases that we have seen with Creative Gainesville have included a family member or somebody that's very close to the child, and has really abused that role and that relationship for their own personal gain.
So when it comes to like a family member, or how is it that they are like pushing or like forcing someone in? And this is where I think it gets kind of confusing, because I heard one story where someone was kind of I don't I'm like I don't know if it's manipulated or coerced would be the right word, but over time she just kind of caught up in the life and didn't really feel like a way out, and so they called her a sex trafficker. But on my side, it kind of sounded like there was this, like no one was necessarily like I've heard of people getting chained up, but in this case, that wasn't the case. That she was never really chained, and if she wanted to, it sounded like she could have left, but then they didn't feel like they could leave. Does that make sense? I think that's where kind of it gets kind of confusing, Can you break
Right.
that down to me? What does that look like? Why don't people just like? I think the common question is like, well, you have the choice to leave. You're an adult. You're in America. You can leave, but they don't feel like they can. Why is that?
Right. That's such a good question. And I get that a lot, especially when we think about the average age of entry for a person who's involved in sex trafficking is somewhere between the ages of 12 and 14 years of age. We think about the development that's happening during that time frame, the self identity and the formulation of healthy relationships in that context. When you have people who are supposed to be your protector, your provider, having you do things that are exploiting you, abusing you, it almost becomes normalized. We have a lot of women that we work with that tell us, I thought every family functioned this way until suddenly I realized they don't. Not every little girl or little boy goes home and then has people coming in to pay for sex. And so that's really how this kind of goes under the radar, is that normalization that happens from a very young age, that sexual abuse and exploitation is what every family does. And then you have the other elements that a lot of traffickers use, which is making their victims afraid of the police, um, also afraid of other adults. They're groomed to not tell. And so there's a lot of psychological and physical implications that happen over the course of years that really break down what somebody might think of as like, oh, I could just leave. Well, that's not the case for a trafficking survivor. When you've been told that if you tell or if you leave, I'm going to beat you or I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to kill your family, then there's a lot of fear that doesn't even need chains or, being locked up to be compliant, because during that grooming process, there's been such a breakdown of who is trustworthy, how to protect self, having control over any aspect of your life. And so it's not just a typical healthy situation where somebody thinks, okay, I could run today. It's very scary to have that idea of running when somebody has threatened so much and has potentially been violent in the past. So it's not just threats, it has been violent acts that have been followed through. Um, so for women that we work with, there are so many complex layers that keep them trapped. And that's why we think, for every single one individual that breaks free from this bondage in the life, as you described it so well, is that it's a miracle. Because for many, it's not only been a couple of years or a couple of months, it's been maybe even a decade of their life or more, of this being wired into them of, this is all you are, no one's going to love you now. So much shame and fear goes into the process that traffickers are really strategic in making their victims think they're the only ones who really care about them. They're the only ones who really love them. And that if they were to leave, they're not going to survive. So there's a lot of manipulation that goes farther than just that physical bondage that we maybe see in movies or maybe even see in graphics a lot of times, of like the wrists tied up. And from survivors, the feedback of that is, man, we got to do different in our culture, because those images of wrists tied up, that's not everybody's situation, and that's actually rare. It usually is happening behind closed doors, and out in the open, it just like blends into plain sight of our community. And so I think sometimes what happens is that society thinks, okay, we're looking for people tied up. That's what we're looking for. But we've got to look much deeper than that. We've got to look for those signs of manipulation and control. We've got to look for those signs that somebody is being groomed, and being lured into the life, and be more preventive in our efforts as well as thinking about that long-term restorative process that victims need.
So what exactly is it that you particularly do then? So like I know like because you're like in the trenches with these women. What is it that you're doing about it?
Right. So we have a four-pronged strategy at Create a Gainesville that includes prevention. So we're going and we're speaking to young people, middle school and high schoolers, educators, parents, on how to keep your children safe, how to keep yourself safe, and also look out for your peers. If something doesn't look right, what do you do? What are strategies that traffickers use? How can you put up safeguards for yourself? The other element is outreach. We go into the areas where women are at high risk for being trafficked and sexually exploited. So we do street outreach. We do outreach in the strip club. We do outreach also in our local jail. And we do advocacy in our courtroom as well. So we go to the places where exploitation is happening and we build relationships and trust with women, and we offer hope that there is a way out. And then the third prong is our restoration. We invite women from these different contexts into an opportunity of healing and restoration. And we know that because it took a long time to get to this point of abuse and manipulation, oftentimes there's been limited opportunities for education. There's been potentially the involvement of addiction and substance abuse as part of keeping that individual compliant and dependent. And so when we think about restoration, we've got to think of a holistic approach to the way that we provide care for women coming out of the life. And so that includes counseling, it includes help navigating the medical system, it includes dental care, it includes every woman getting a mentor. Also, we do groups throughout the week where women come together and they get to walk the journey together, hand in hand, be an encouragement to one another, sharing the real raw stuff of the process with one another. And then we take it a step further by providing women opportunities to continue their education, to get job opportunities, to work on their resume, to have these job readiness skills and life skills to not only heal, but to also be sustainable for a lifetime, to be able to not only leave the life, but stay out of the life. And so that we feel like that's really important for women to really have those opportunities that are holistic and walk beside them for the long term. And then that last prong is awareness. We go out into the community and we share about what does sex trafficking look like in our state. We educate our citizens on what are the myths and misconceptions about sex trafficking and what can we do about it. You know, it's not enough just to learn about that it's happening, but what can we actually do? Because we all can do something. And so that's our heartbeat at Create a Gainesville, is to really empower individuals who have experienced this horror in their life, but also empower our community. Like, these are our children and our women. And so we have the ability to get to walk beside them in their healing and restoration and to be a voice for them. And that really goes a long way.
All right. So as far as what we can do, what is that you want people to like, as far as just general public to know, and as far as what everyone can do about it?
Right. There are so many things that people can do. I would definitely say if this is something that you're thinking about taking part in, it's been a passion of yours, your heart's been broken for this, and you're like, okay, I know some things, but I want to take it a step further and I want to do some stuff. I encourage everybody to visit our website. It's createagainesville.com. We have so many different opportunities on our website that people can get involved. It can be anything from donating supplies to becoming a mentor or a tutor. It can include somebody donating even their professional expertise. If somebody has a particular skill set that benefits the women that we serve, it can becoming a monthly financial supporter of the organization or a one-time financial supporter. There are so many ways that people can really empower our organization to keep moving forward and really enable us to keep being able to do what we do, but also open up even greater opportunities. For example, in 2019, we reached 439 lives, 439 women we met through our various outreaches that I just shared about. And so what we want to be able to do is, yes, welcome women into our program, which is called Created Care, where that holistic care approach is available. But we also want to be able to open the doors to a safe home. And so we're working steadily right now to be able to open up a residential facility that will serve North Central Florida and really the entire state, to be able to help even more women in the year to come.
So one argument that I've been hearing recently that would, well, not recently, I was talking to someone about this years ago, as far as ways to like help, not, I don't know if eliminating is the right word, but at least reducing it, would be to legalize prostitution, right? Because right now, since it's illegal, people want to do it in secret, and there's this argument saying that if you legalized it, that it would cause like it would force people to not be able to do it like so secretly anymore. Um, and I know some countries have legalized, some haven't. What's like as far as created? What's the viewpoint on that? Like, does that work? Does that not work?
Right. Our viewpoint is that we're not a fan of legalizing prostitution. And the reason is kind of multifaceted. One reason is that normalization of exploiting individuals becomes even greater than it already is. And we already see that in our nation without it being legalized, that, we see it everywhere. The exploitation and objectification of children and women is running rampant. Our rates of sexual abuse and assault is through the roof. The exposure that children now have to pornography, the average first experience to pornography is age 8 right now. And that's alarming, because what that does is it rewires the way that a child is developing, and it becomes this addiction that just can't be quenched, can't be satisfied. And so it ends up being a more and more consuming thing. The pornography that is viewed becomes more and more violent, and eventually the rates of actually acting on those things that a child has seen growing up becomes a higher risk. When we think about legalizing prostitution, our view is that it would have the same type of effect, is that it would normalize that you can purchase people for your own satisfaction and use. We also view that the life of prostitution is not as simple as a choice. For the women that we serve, nobody dreamed of becoming involved in prostitution as a little girl. And the life is full of violence. It is also full of having a higher rate of disease, and multiple times a day being raped, being assaulted. And so the lifespan of somebody who is involved in prostitution is very low. From the point somebody enters in, the average age span where they will possibly lose their life is roughly 7 years. There are no other professions that have that high of a risk to do them. And so we have to look at that in terms of, are we opening up a door for people to be plagued with disease and sexual assault, and that we almost put the stamp of this being okay in our society. We have to look too at the whole story of where somebody has come from who is maybe involved in prostitution. For us, almost 100% of women that we work with who have been involved in prostitution, it began when they were children. It began with sexual abuse as a child, incest, molestation. That was really the beginning of the grooming. It wasn't called that. People don't always label it as grooming, but essentially, those acts upon that child have groomed them to be vulnerable to that trafficker or pimp that might come into their life later on. They've already broken the barriers of what is normal, what's acceptable, and what makes you valuable. And so we want to make sure that we're not actually condoning and celebrating the fact that the majority of women who are involved in prostitution have already lived a life of significant abuse, have usually had multiple abusers throughout the time. And so for us, what we would encourage is that our efforts are more geared towards rehabilitation and restoration and combating this issue from every side, boosting up our prevention efforts, also boosting up our awareness so that hopefully the demand stops. You know, through our awareness, we hope that people will kind of push pause and say, wait, what have I done to contribute to sex trafficking growing in the world? Or what have I not done to stop it in my own sphere of influence? And so what we want to do is we want to slow down the supply, we want to stop the demand, and we want to care for those in the middle that have already been violated and trafficked and need people like Create a Gainesville and others to come alongside them and say, you know what, this stuff has happened to you, but this is not your identity. This is not the definition of your life. There is so much value and purpose for your life. And if you want to take that step out, we'll be here to walk with you. And so for us, our mission isn't to come in and convince women that what they're doing is wrong or they need to leave right away. That's not at all what we're doing. We're coming in and we're developing a relationship and trust. And we're saying to women who say to us, like, I'd do anything for this to stop, to say, you know what, we can walk beside you to get there. You don't have to stay stuck here. There is hope. There is a way out, and it's going to be a long process. But if you're serious about this, there are people who are serious about you and will walk beside you to your freedom and your healing and your restoration.
That got me really emotional. I'm sorry. You mentioned how like pornography is so much more easily accessed. And one thing I was thinking about was, even like entertainment on television has become like overly sexualized now from just
Right.
general TV. I know there's a big controversy about that movie. What was it? Cuties that just came out.
Right.
Uh, do you feel like the entertainment aspects on just not even just pornography, but like just regular like Netflix, cable television, TV has like increased the demand of this?
Um, it's a hard one to say. I think that it definitely hasn't helped. I would definitely say that there is a Hollywood version of what being in the sex industry is like. There has definitely been an over sexualization of young people that contributes to just this overall brokenness of our society, that we would look at children as sexual objects to be purchased. I think we have to look at that across the board, and we can't ignore that. I do feel like Hollywood should really look inward and really have some accountability measures of We can't say we're for justice and then produce movies or songs that basically celebrate the exploitation of people and almost make it a joke or even a celebrity status. It's not funny to celebrate that somebody's calling themselves a pimp. It's not funny that we're doing movies that accentuate the sexuality of children and exploit that. So I think that's where, Hollywood really has a position available to really turn the paradigm to one in which is informed, that really looks inward of what is their impact and starts taking a greater stance towards fighting back on this evil, that they really fight back on, hey, how are we normalizing this? There are so many things that are happening in society that make it just no big deal. And you add the movies, you add the music industry, you add social media and what's normal, across social media platforms. And we really have this recipe for disaster when it comes to what we're teaching our young people. So I just really encourage our parents who are listening to guard your kiddos, know what they're doing online, know what they're watching. Really sit down and have these heart-to-heart talks about what does it look like to see exploitation in your midst, even identify it with your kids, like instead of just kind of letting it pass and it be something that's just normal, like this is just what we see on TV. Like really take those moments to have learning opportunities with your children.
Wow. One last question for you. Why did you start doing this? Like, you probably had, I met you, it seems like you could probably do a lot of things. You're very talented and you're very passionate about, like, why this particular thing?
Right. So probably about 10 years ago, I came to this point in my personal life that it was just really clear that there was a lot of pain in our world. I was at that time, I had studied to be a speech language pathologist. I had taken a break from the clinic to stay at home with my 5 children. And I was getting ready to go back into the clinical world. But along that time, I just started praying, like, God, would you reveal to me the pain and the suffering that's happening in this world where you want me? I can't do everything. I totally know my limitations. And I'll say I was sleep deprived. I was a young mom to 5 small children. We had 5 children in 7 years. So talk about
Wow.
like major limitations, and that meant time, energy, finances. But I still was like, God, like you can do much out of our little. And so where do you want me? And right around that time, I was actually in a church service and they showed a video from a wonderful organization out of India called Project Rescue.
Mm.
And the ages of the children on the screen and in the stats up on the screen were the ages of my kids. And I just sat there like I had never heard about sex trafficking before. And I was like, what in the world? My life was just wrecked right there. And then thinking about my Caleb and my Ricardo and, my Ethan, their little faces and their ages, and just imagining that all over the world, including right here in our neighborhoods, there are children at these ages that when they should be protected and guarded are being abused and trafficked. And so that was it for me. I was like, okay, I'm in. And so I had no idea what it would look like to be in, but I just started reaching out to other organizations that were doing anti-sex trafficking work and just started asking, can I come and hang out with you? Can I come and receive training from you? I just want to learn. And so in 2012, very humbly, we started with myself and 2 people. And we just started out as like, okay, what are we going to do here in Gainesville? And our first steps really were to go out into the community and spend time with women. and learn from women who are experiencing sex trafficking and sexual exploitation. Lean in, like get those nuggets of like just what life has been like for them. And then ask the question, if you were to have the opportunity to get out today, what would you need? And so to
Mm,
start the organization from those voices, those lists of things, like I would need people who are safe, who are healthy, who are for me, walking beside me. I would need opportunities to try to find safe housing. I would need accountability for keeping my sobriety a high priority. I would need opportunities to go back to school so that I can get jobs. So all those things we took into account and then ended up being really the foundation of our program that we have today and will live on forever. And it is truly through the voices of survivors that we are here today and doing the work that we do. And they truly are the heroes in the story of Create a Gainesville. Women who have walked through literal hell and back, have survived, and are walking the journey of healing and restoration. And not just for themselves. Like once a woman heals, she never wants to keep it for herself. She always wants to go back to the women that she knows that are still out there and say, there's a place for you. Come with me. And that is the beauty of this organization, is that it's never just about one person. It is always about the next generation and the generation to come. Those maybe family generational wounds that have been there and passed down for 3 or 4 generations, they get to stop, and a new legacy gets to be brought forward for the next generation and the generation to come. And that just gets us so excited, because women are really being the strongest voices for each other and the most powerful voice in the room. When a new woman comes in and says, this is overwhelming and this is hard and this is new and I don't know if I have what it takes to do this, for a woman who's 2 years into her journey can look at her and say, listen, I've been where you are. I know what you're thinking and what you're feeling. And if I can do it, and if I'm alive and I shouldn't be, and you shouldn't be either, like if I can do it, you can do it too. And we have each other to lean on as we walk this out. Um, it just is so powerful. And there's so much more work to be done in our community, but we really know that there are no limitations when ordinary people, Marvin, like you and I, just come together with our hearts and our passions and our giftings and just say, I'm in, and it could be something seemingly small, but for a woman who's taking those brave steps to get out and to reclaim her life, it could literally mean the difference between life and death for her. And so I just want to commission, and really challenge your listeners to think about, what is your yes? What could that look like for you? Maybe it's not quitting your full-time job and, becoming staff. Maybe it's becoming a monthly supporter. Maybe it's looking through your shoes and seeing which ones are in really great shape that you don't wear anymore. And it could be something that a woman could use for church or for a job interview. There's just so much that we can do to be one small part of a woman's journey towards healing and restoration and her freedom.
wow. Um, this has probably been the most inspiring podcast I've done, at least just for me. And I feel like I say that oftentimes on this podcast, but truly it's like I'm very humbled and I am just amazed at what you do. And that's like, and I genuinely mean that so much. And I'm honored that you came on this podcast. I have so many more questions for you, so I'm gonna have to have you back on sometime very soon because just wow, Allison, really.
Wait,
Um,
it happened.
yeah. Well, we got to wrap this up, but where can people find out more about Creative Gainesville? And just so we're clear, I'm not in Gainesville, Florida anymore. Your created Gainesville is Gainesville, Florida. Is that correct?
Right.
Um, that's where you guys are doing a lot of the work, amazing work. Uh, so where can they find out more about your like information as far as getting in touch on how to help, or just even learning more about what you do?
Awesome. So we have our website, which is createdgainesville.com. We also have a social media platform on Facebook and on Instagram. And I would just love to, have people from all over the state and country who are coming to our website, to our social media platforms, learning about what we do, what this looks like in your own backyard. And, the cool part is that all the time we're getting to work with other organizations all over the state and nation, because sometimes a victim or survivor needs to relocate. Or sometimes somebody here in Gainesville needs to relocate to maybe Orlando or Miami, or to, an out of state opportunity. And so it's so beautiful to be able to learn about the different works that are happening everywhere, and to be able to figure out, like, where do I fit? Where can I plug in? Maybe this isn't local for you, but there is definitely a way that you can take part in what we're doing. We have people that live outside of town that are thinking about us in terms of becoming a business partner with what we do. And that's so humbling to us that there are businesses, not even in Gainesville, Florida, who are saying, wait, we see what you're doing. We love what you're doing. There's not something like Created Gainesville in our city. And so we want to partner with you. So come check us out. Come follow us. We would love to have you be part of our family.
And then for our listeners up there, get in touch with me, the new Instagram page, All My Friends Talk on Instagram, or you can look up just me at The Only Marvin GM. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and also please go check out Creative Games. They really are the real deal. And I love this. All right, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon, Allison. Okay.
Awesome.